Welcome. This video is about Stripe customer portal and Bubble connectivity. For example, I have a Stripe customer, Brent Summer, who I am just the customer ID I'm hard coding here. And when I click on Manage Billing, it goes straight to the Stripe portal for this specific customer, Brent Summer, where he can look at his subscription product and cancel his plan. He can change the payment method, even all his personal data he can maintain and manage from here. And when we click here, it takes us back to the customer's own portal or wherever we started, right? Now that was statically provided customer ID information. Now here I went a little bit more dynamic. Here I have a customer logged in, and this customer has the information, the customer ID in the database. And when I click here, we end up in that customer's Stripe portal. And just to push it a little bit further, we go to the data, and we have another customer with the customer ID. These are all statically entered data, by the way. So here, Bubble allows us to test the user by running the application as that user, using this button right here, Run As, so that we don't have to go through building the entire customer registration and login information. This is just a nice little way we can test things. So I click here. So now we can see MooseDev is logged in. So at this point, if I click the same button, we end up at MooseDev's portal. So now this is being dynamic. The idea behind it is that eventually at one point we might be able to pull all the customer data straight from Stripe and register them so that all this data will be dynamically filled in. But that's for the future. At this point, our focus is simply creating this button and have the internal stuff set up so that they work as I showed you. And next would be pulling all the customer data in and showing them on the front page. And I'm doing all that using no third-party plugin, but just a simple Bubble API connector and the Stripe API documentation, my own Stripe account, and with all my test data in test mode. That being said, let's go build all these from scratch. Okay, so we are at our Bubble editor. So I have a template page here where everything is set. The Flexbox layout has been installed, and the whole page is given a column layout, and the UI builder is set to 1280 and minimum height is 800. Now we should just go ahead and create a new page, call it Stripe customer portal, and we're going to clone our index, create. Okay, so now we are at Stripe customer portal page, has exact same settings. So let's start with building the interface. Get a text in here and give it a heading dark H1, and we're going to call it Stripe customer portal. Layout, get rid of the fixed width, keep the minimum, no problem, and go back, remove the base styles and center it. Now let's go back and give it a top margin of 50, bottom margin of 30, and let's preview. Okay, so we have our page started. Now let's go grab another text element This one we will pick an H2 dark, and we're going to call it for Brent Summer, and that's going to be our static client. Let's remove this style and make it bold and centered, and go to layout, get rid of the fixed width, and it is already in right place, and we're not going to worry about the rest. Now let's go grab a button. Let's call it manage billing. I'm going to maintain the fixed width, but let's make it a 250 and give it a 70 pixel height. Looks pretty nice. And while we're at it, let's remove this basic styles and give a roundness of, let's say, 20. Layout, center it, looking good. Preview. All right, now let's go back, highlight this guy, Control C, Control V, highlight this guy, this button, Control C, Control V, and after highlighting this, let's go click on and the layout. From the layout, we're going to say move it to next. And at this point, I'm going to give it this guy a top margin of 30 pixel, and this text should be for logged in user. There you go. We already have all the styling, so Control C, Control V, and this guy, highlight this and send him to next. And now this one, we're going to change logged in as colon, get some dynamic data, current user name. Click, goes blue, we're good. Now let's preview. Okay, so since nobody's logged in, so it doesn't know who we are logged in as, so we're going to keep it as is. Later on when we test it, it's going to show up just fine. Okay, so now we have our front end prepared. Now let's look into the back end. All right, so we are at the plugin in our editor, and let's add a plugin, and all we're going to need is the default API connector by Bubble. No third-party plugin, just the API connector. Install, done. We have our API connector. Now let's go to work. Add another API. Okay, so now let's set up our API name. I'm just going to give it a name of Stripe Moose. And authentication, we're going to pick from the list private key in header. And in here, we have to put in our Stripe API secret key. From the production version goes here, and development version goes here. So since we're gonna just build a test one, so I'm just gonna use this development one. So let's go to my account, and this is my Stripe account in test mode. So let's click on developers and then API keys. So this is my publishable key and secret key here. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and copy it. Okay, I just copied this. Now let's go back. So before I even paste that secret key, I have to type in B-E-A-R-E-R, bearer, and space, and now I will paste it. That's it. Our connectivity has been set. Now let's go to the next step. So this part was just connectivity, and now we should start our main work, creating the actual API connection with the results, right? So let's call this create Moose portal. And since this is something we're going to connect to a button action, so we're going to change this data to an action, because whenever we change this to an action, it shows up under workflows, and whenever we change it under data, it shows up under design, so that we can directly involve that to our repeating groups. It will all be clear very soon, don't worry. Okay, so now that being said, now let's check up on the Stripe API documentation for a second. Okay, so this is where the customer portal documentation lies, and this is what we're going to need. This is the URL, and it's telling us to use the method post, and the full URL would be looking like this. The same thing that you saw in the documentation /v1 billing portal sessions. We just add https api.stripe.com. So we just take this, copy it, and use it right here. And as you saw before, that they want us to use a post request, and that being done, the next we have to set up our header, and in header this is the information will go, right? Content type, copy, paste this guy right here, copy, paste it right there. Okay, so our base structure is done. Now one more time, let's go back to the documentation. All right, so to move ahead a little bit, when I click on it, they take you to the actual request, and they actually show you what the result you're going to get. This is the customer object that Stripe will give you, Stripe API. And in here, when you're placing your request, looks like there are two parameters it's going to require. One is the customer ID, and they're going to say just customer, and return URL is the URL where it will come back to. Basically, this page right here, this page. So now let's create our parameters. This should be customer, and the customer ID, let's go to my Stripe account, click on customer, and right here, Brent Summer, click on it, copied it, and let's bring it back and paste it. There you go. And here we're gonna make a little bit of change, get rid of the private and make it a query string, and it's gonna be long, right? Now next one is return URL, return underscore URL, just like right here. Actually it says return dash URL, so let's make it a return dash URL. And now let's go collect this URL from here. This is going to be our page. Before we copy, let's just remove this debugging information. Control A, Control C, go back, and as a value, let's paste that here. Okay, so with that, we are done with our connectivity action for the Stripe portal. And once you are done, it actually tells you before it works, you have to initialize it. So let's initialize, and that will tell us if this is going to work. And it didn't, made a mistake. I will be right back with a fix. Okay, so initially our error was this, right? So it turns out, even though the documentation says return dash URL, Bubble has an issue. Bubble doesn't take a dash here, so I had to use a underscore, and here's an oversight. Since the first one was, I just got rid of the private and query string and long, I forgot to set this as exact, right? So now let's try again. Boom, there you go. It is actually going out there and getting all the necessary data from the customer portal and mapping them to their data type. That being done, let's save it. Now we have prepared our back end for action. Let's go back to the front end and wire everything up. So we are back at design, and this time we're going to test our static info, go with the Brent Summers billing button, and let's go and create a workflow. Here we're going to go to a plugin and find Stripe Moose, create Moose portal, and right there we see Brent Summers ID and the URL for the return URL. All the data is set. Now we have to move to another step. Now that we have our connectivity created, we go to navigation and open an external website. To open an external website, it's going to need an URL, right? So how are we going to get it? We are making it dynamic. We're going to get it from the result of the step number one. This is step number one. And this step number one will get us the result, all this information. We're going to get the URL from it. And that's where we're going. And this URL will take us to the Stripe customer portal. Okay, let's go back to design and go to a preview. Now let's click on manage billing. Bada bing, bada boom. There you go. We are at Brent's customer portal where he can update his information, where he can cancel his subscription plan, which is right here, and add a new payment method. Basically manage his own account information. That being done, our URL is generated by the Stripe API, and this is where the return URL goes. So if I click on it, it takes us here. Now let's go focus on this guy right here. All right, we're back at our bubble editor, and before we create a workflow for this button, we need to go ahead and update our database. And as you see here, there is no item that will hold a customer ID. So we're going to create a new field, call it Stripe customer ID, and this will be a text create. Now that we have that, let's go back to the app data, all users, and let's add a new one. Okay, we're going to put a city in here, Atlanta, and call him Moose Dev. No photo necessary, role customer. And these two, let's grab from the source. Let's get this guy right here, get the customer ID copied, and put it in here, go back and grab his email address. This is really not necessary, but I'm just doing it anyway. And let's create. Okay, while we're at it, just for test's sake, let's create, oh actually they didn't update, so let's refresh the data. Sometimes it doesn't do it, so we have to actually refresh the whole app. All users, there you go. Now we have our user in here. Okay, once again, let's refresh the whole app to see that our data is here. And there you go, we have two customer data with customer ID. Now that being done, let's go back to design. Now let's click on this guy. This is for the logged in user. Start a workflow. Good, and looks like this was already done, but here we actually emptied it out because we wanted to make this customer ID dynamic. Let's go to current user, and this time we have a Stripe customer ID. Boom. So we are getting it straight from the database according to which user is logged in, and we're maintaining our return URL the same. That being done, let's go to navigation, open an external website, and in here we will get the result of step 1, and we will use the URL from it. Click here, all blue, we're good. Now let's go back here. Actually, let's turn this off. What Bubble does is, from our database itself, we can actually run it as specific user so that it looks like that user is logged in. This is a fantastic feature. I love it because this way I don't have to create the entire experience of user registration and login just to test something. So here, let's go with this athlete WooCommerce guy, run as, and now you can see logged in as athlete WooCommerce 1, and we click on manage billing, and we are right now at his portal, and we click to go back, and this time also we shut it down and we run it as MooseDev. Now it's showing up as MooseDev, and when we click on manage billing, we are right there at MooseDev's account. And that concludes the part 1 of Bubble and Stripe. And next, we're going to handle pulling all the customer data in. If you like this video, please smash the like button and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please smash the like button and the subscribe button. This will help me bring more free contents like this to you every week. Thanks again.